Thank you all. Bill is also amazing. As he mentioned, my name is LaFawn Bailey. I'm actually with PayPal in the Global Employee Communications team, but I also work on culture and diversity. I used to be with Google and Yahoo, eBay before it split. This is my colleague Martina.
Hi, I'm Martina Abrahams. I'm at Adroll. I'm on the product marketing team, but I also work on diversity and inclusion at Adroll. Before that, I was at Google, and I was one of the leads for the Black Googler Network in the New York City office.
All right, now that you know who we are, we want to know who you are. So, how many HR practitioners do we have in the room? Oh, nice. How many executives? Founders? Nice. Engineers? Nonprofits? Cool. Professors? Nice. Am I forgetting anybody, Martina?
People who just care about diversity. Awesome.
There we go.
So now we want to hear from 2 or 3 people what you're looking to get out of this workshop. So show of hands, I'll pick on a few people. Brave volunteers. Yes.
There are some people in our company that really want us to be better about inclusion and diversity, and there's a little bit of pushback from the usual suspects who think we don't need it because we're better than that. And so some language and tactics that we can use to help them see it.
Very nice.
Perfect. Awesome.
Okay.
I'd love to hear some war stories, especially around getting. Ooh, it's really loud. Getting people at the very top to buy into diversity and inclusion, not just the talk. I mean, like the walk right around it, and because I feel like that's so vital to doing, especially in large places like PayPal and Adroll.
Okay. Thank you. We'll take one more.
Someone in the back? Sorry to make you run.
Good hustle. How to start from absolute zero with a company that is much further along than absolute zero.
Okay. So I'm hearing starting from zero, getting executive buy-in and them to walk the talk, and how to get people who think you don't need to do anything to actually do something, right? Okay, so those are 3 perspectives. I'm sure there's lots of other things that we want to do. This is one of those areas where if somebody had gotten it right all the way, we wouldn't be here, right? So we talk about best practices, but honestly, we're all just trying to do good. And so we're going to share some of that stuff today. There is one rule here. This is a safe space. A good idea can come from anywhere. So let's be inclusive in our diversity of thought, okay? Actually, I lied. There is another rule. This is a workshop. So that means you guys are going to work. We're actually going to do breakout sessions and share with each other because, again, Martina and I can share what we know, but really we're going to learn from each other today. Okay? All right, so a few definitions just to make sure that we're all on the same page, because diversity and inclusion means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, a lot of different companies, a lot of different industries, right? So when we're talking about hold on, that was 3. Okay, a diverse workforce, right? A diverse workforce is really about including people of all different backgrounds, perspectives, orientations, different leadership styles. Martina and I were having a conversations about introverts versus extroverts, right? It's what makes people unique and anything that they can bring to the table. And when we're talking about business, it's using those characteristics in order to create workplace inclusion, right? That's about the environment that you create. It's the respect, it's the connection, it's the community in which your diversity thrives. And lastly, hold on, going too fast.
Want me to do it?
Yeah. There we go, I got it. A diverse and inclusive marketplace is around ensuring that your products and services reflect the global user base and the customers that you serve. Okay, so those are our definitions for the purposes of this workshop. I'm sure there's lots of other definitions, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, goodness, this thing. So now we're going to be talking about kind of 5 key steps around best practices for diversity and inclusion.
Awesome. So the first step is confronting the brutal facts. This is your starting point. It's kind of like taking your current state of affairs. And for the gentleman that said, how do I get executive buy-in? This is a great place to start. So you want to understand and get data around what do our demographics currently look like? What does your culture look like? I'd even go as far as saying, how do people feel about working at my company and the current state of affairs? And where have you already been successful if you have been successful? And where else can you develop and grow? The second step is, go back. So something that we've done at Adroll, we're actually working on this right now. We recently started a task force to work on diversity inclusion. And we're gathering a lot of this information via surveys. That's just one way to do it. We take a pulse survey annually that kind of touches on it, but we found a few different vendors that specialize on diversity and inclusion that can survey the entire company, and people can anonymously provide their feedback. And we can also get a sense of demographic breakout based off of race, ethnicity, gender, homosexual, sexual orientation, etc. So the next step is declaring yourself. So if the first step is figuring out who are we today, this is more where do we want to be, who do we want to be? So what does your company stand for? And this is really hard to develop as a grassroots. You can try, but if you don't have the exec buy-in, then it'll almost be impossible to implement this moving forward. So using the data that you gather in the first step and going to your exec team or the people the decision makers in your company and persuading them and letting them see, like, we actually have a problem, these are our numbers, we have to fix this. You really want to bring them on board and helping you create and understand what your company wants to stand for. So this is where you define what diversity and inclusion means to you. It can really vary team by team, company by company. At lunch, LaFawn and I were speaking about my team right now. We're all women. We're very racially diverse. We have me, an African-American woman. We have a few Asian women. We have a few Indian women. But we're all women. We don't have any men. So we're not diverse yet. So you really have to understand, what does diversity mean if a team is all male, all women, all of one race? How do we find ways to represent more of the world on our team and in the company?
Okay, next is create a disciplined plan. A lot of times this is really hard, right? So you've confronted the brutal facts. You've seen that you're not a diverse company, whatever that means. You kind of have some executive buy-in, maybe there's some grassroots things going on, but you have to make an action plan to really move the needle in any of those areas, whether you're talking about creating a more diverse workforce, whether you're talking about having a more inclusive workplace, whether you're talking about your products and services. So really it's taking a look at, can we create initiatives around recruiting or retention, leadership accountability, right? And you do not need to solve the world's problems, right? We're not gonna create world peace tomorrow. So really taking a look at a plan and what you can do long-term, because diversity and inclusion is not solved in a quarter. As much as your company might want it to be, it is not, right? But there are things that you can do in a quarter to take steps. And then you look at what can we do in a year? What can we do in 5 years? And eventually over time, if you stick to your plan and it's rooted in strategy, and I'm gonna say that again, it's rooted in strategy, then you will see that you'll be able to move the needle in your workplace. One of the things that I did at Google when I was on the diversity team is we actually sat with the top executives and went over, here's your workforce, here's what your promotion rates are, here's some action plans and some steps that you can take within your organization. We're always talking about executive accountability, but we're not telling them what to do, right? And so with the information, when you confront the brutal facts, you are able to create a plan to actually take action. Next is educate the organization. Give me 1 second to go through the rest of them and then I'll take question. So educating the organization is really small to large. This does not have to be spending $50,000 on a diversity trainer to come in and talk to your whole organization. It could be small. Right? So an example of this is doing diversity training. So at PayPal, our global operations and kind of customer service area, which is the largest part of our company, they took it upon themselves to do diversity training for their team leaders. They weren't waiting for a company initiative. They weren't waiting for an executive to tell them what to do. They said, this is something we need to do for our organization, and so we're going to roll it out to all of our team leaders. They just did it. There's also things like unconscious bias training, right? Sometimes the word diversity makes people a little iffy, especially if they don't understand it, and it can turn people away. But unconscious bias is something that affects everyone. We all have it. Every single person has it. So you can't really argue with that. It's not, excluding anyone to talk about unconscious bias. And really, you can dive deep in there when you talk about recruiting initiatives. Are we, as an organization, do we have unconscious bias against people that don't fit the normal profile, right? So doing things like resume tests. So John Smith, Jane Smith, same exact experience. I guarantee you, if it is not an organization that is conscious about their unconscious bias, that there's going to be some differences in what they see in that resume, just because those names are different. Lastly, put in the work. I know that there's a lot of organizations who think cutting the check is going to make the difference. Not that money's not important. I know nonprofits in the room. Money's important, right? But it's about writing the check and about giving the rest of your resources. The most important resources you have at your company are your people. So while you're cutting the check for an organization, also have people that are mentors, right? Also take a look at helping the pipeline at the earlier stage, which is for tech, children, right? Helping to increase the pipeline. It is actually putting your money where your mouth is. And this sometimes is harder when you don't have a lot of buy-in at your company yet, right? There's not a lot of people that will tell you diversity is the wrong thing to do. It's always the right thing to do, right? But it's about resources, it's about time, it's about funds. And at this last step, that's where you really start to see your action come into place. Okay? So those are the 5 kind of key areas that we're going to be talking about today. And again, we're going to make you guys put in the work, because this is not just about Martina and I sharing what we've learned. So let me set it up for you all. We're going to do 5 breakout groups, and we're going to try to make it as easy as possible, because I know this is a long room and not a wide room, right? So we're going to do this group right here. I'm going to walk and talk. Okay, so you guys are breakout group 1, okay? You guys, 2, 3, yeah, 4, okay? My loungers, you guys are 5. All right, so we have 5 breakout groups to talk about the 5 key areas that we just discussed, and there are flip charts. I heard that there are people in charge of said flip charts in the 5 different areas. Can you raise your hand if you're in charge of a flip chart? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. So I'm going to put up the wheel just so you guys can see it. So group 1, you're talking about confronting the brutal facts. Okay? So how do you get a snapshot of your company's demographics? What kind of audit can you do to find out what's already happening at your company? Those types of things. Those are just teasers to get you started, but you're all sharing together. Talk about things that you know have worked well, but also brand new ideas that you're like, I kind of want to try this, and I'm not quite sure how. Right? Group 2, you guys are going to talk about declaring yourselves. What do you want to stand for, and how do you make it known? Group 3, you're going to talk about creating a disciplined plan. What kinds of plan can be put into place around recruiting, retention, leadership, inclusivity? Group 4, you're going to talk about educating the org. So what kinds of education, big and small, could you do to inform and empower your organization? And my loungers in the back, group 5, you're going to talk about putting in the work, right? So what programs and initiatives could you put into place to take action and see results? Don't forget about measuring your success. It's the only way that you continue to get buy-in to keep doing what you want to do. Okay? So we're going to have about 15 minutes.
Do you want to answer his question?
Did you have a question in the back really quick?
Yeah, I think this is more for group 3, but you mentioned that you actually gave the Google execs you worked with like specific action plans, and I was curious if you could give some examples of like things that you actually recommended them that they did implement.
Yes, I will, after the breakout.
Great.
I don't want to give you guys any ideas, okay? So definitely can. All right, so we've got about 15 minutes. to have these discussions, and then we're going to share out. Again, you guys are going to have to work, so make sure that you choose somebody to write down some stuff, and that you choose somebody that can speak on your group's behalf. And we need to move pretty quickly, so I know it's kind of difficult to kind of turn around, but we don't want to lose any time in the breakouts. Ready, go. Okay, everybody, let's go. We don't want to lose any time in being able to hear what your best practices are. So I'm going to ask you to quiet it down. Don't make me start calling people out. Some of you I know, I'll start calling names. I see you, Cindy. Mm-hmm. All right, guys, we're going to start with group 1.
Confront the brutal facts. Who's the spokesperson for... Oh, there you are. You want to take the mic?
Hello.
Can I ask you guys to please be quiet in the back so we can share group 1? Thank you.
So we had a lot of great ideas. My name is Lakeisha Poole, and so some of our ideas in terms of collecting data was to have a third party come in. We talked about having support from HR. In terms of getting information, we talked about having shared research, like having data with respect to studies on discrimination and inclusion included for companies, and to, let's see, what else were we at? I think we also talked about C-suite support. I'm trying to remember everything that we talked about. We had a lot of great ideas. Yeah. What was that? Oh yeah, in terms of dealing with internal resistance, we
like HR not being willing to give surveys out or something.
Okay.
yeah, we were talking about the issue about the legal implications about having this information, because all of that could be potentially discoverable. So that's
right.
reason to have maybe an attorney do it. So technically, it's attorney-client privilege. So, but still, but yeah, no. But in terms of trying to get the information, to get also, I talked about it in terms of social compliance monitoring the space, having interviews and getting in feedback beyond just a survey, so you can get the information in the context of not just diversity, but how can you make the work environment better? So that might solicit more people and address the resistance that could happen from just talking about diversity. So that's pretty much the overview.
Very nice. Let's give group 1 a round of applause. one tidbit on that one. So she made a really good point. You guys aren't just going to be able to get your hands on the numbers, right? It's not like you walk into your chief HR officer and just go, hey, listen, I need a report. And I'm trying to make some changes and some things need to happen. I need to know where we are. It doesn't work like that, right? That is personal information, that's demographics, that not everyone, first of all, volunteers to give, and then 2, if you have that information, what are you going to do with it? It is discoverable. If you find that there's an issue, you now have to do something with it. That's a lot of responsibility that you might not want to have. So I'll give you a little anecdote. I found it really difficult to make change without the information, right? So when I was with the Black Googlers Network at Google, I was like, I need to know how many people we have so I know what to shoot for. And my mentor at the time just said, you don't need to know how many people are here to do better, right? You know walking around that there's not enough, so just do better. What can we do to increase wherever we are? We know that we're going to want to increase that. So it's not necessarily always about getting your hands on the numbers, but it is thinking about what diversity means for your company, right? And if you have HR professionals who have this information, making sure that you're pushing that so that they have goals themselves in order to increase recruiting, so that they have retention measures in place, et cetera. So it's not always about you just getting it, but confronting the brutal facts is about the whole story, not just about the numbers.
And something that we did at Adroll was compare ourselves to other companies that are similarly sized in the same space. So, Pinterest has released their numbers, Airbnb, I think, released their numbers. And so even if you're not able to get your own, there are benchmarks in the industry out there, and showing the people in your company that may have access to that information and may be hesitant to share it, that other companies have shared it, have that information, can be useful in getting them to work with you.
So now,
Group 2.
Group 2 is declare yourself.
Hi, we're pairing. So I'm Fiona, and this is James. We're both from ThoughtWorks. We had Declare Yourself. And I would say that for our group, declaring yourself is really about listening and dialogue and having that conversation with your organization. So we had very practical things, everything from doing a Google form and surveys to having discussion groups. What does that look like to you? And I love that this particular quote from one of our participants, which was about having an abundance mindset of what that vision around diversity and inclusion looks like for your company. So extending that, it's around applying a diversity lens to an existing framework around your own mission and values. And as well as bringing in a lot of different viewpoints. That mission and those values may look very different for each individual person in your organization. How do we bring that all together and making sure that we can include everyone? So other examples of things that we can do to declare ourselves, holding focus groups with executives and managers, right? We had that question around how do we build executive buy-in, get them to tell us what they think that diversity looks like in your organization, and does your data actually match that up, or is there a mismatch? And finally, we have one that is around, who do you need to be to get there? Do we need to be honest, vulnerable, and bold, right? And who does that take from everyone who, what does that look like from the people in your organization? And then finally, we had a bit of a cheeky aside. When we talk about declaring ourselves, does that not include introverts, right? How do they live? Declaring yourself. So that's a good question, I think, to leave with everybody. And if we can't think of anything right now, we can post on it on social media later.
That was great.
Thank you for that. Everybody give them a round of applause. All right, group 3, you ready? You can go, stay right back there. We'll get you a mic. So group 3 is creating a disciplined plan. Thank you.
First part of the plan is getting the poster to stand up by itself. I'm Annie. I'm speaking for group 3, but they might jump in if I'm overlooking something. So we built off of directly from Declare a Plan, because we think that's an important first step. And that plays into everything we want to do for actually creating a plan. So the 3 areas we focused on with creating a plan is recruiting, retention, and advancement. And we think at each of these levels, it's important to be data-driven. So whether that's qualitative data or quantitative data, have something to be able to report. So to kind of break this down, we didn't necessarily, they all fit in within these 3 areas, but we didn't necessarily label it. So one of the suggestions was needing someone to be invested on the recruiting team who's going to try some different methods of recruiting. For example, spending a little extra time on LinkedIn to find those candidates and put those candidates directly in front of the VP of engineering. Someone talked about going to Hackbright, was it? And kind of bringing some of those candidates in to just kind of diversified the pool. And then another suggestion was to identify a champion on the business side or the hiring managers, because ultimately it is up to the hiring managers to bring in that candidate and actually hire them. So if you have someone who's particularly passionate about diversity, it's nice to have another champion on that side of things. And then for recruiting, one of the suggestions was to source at different events and organizations where you can find some different candidates. So it's, again, just kind of expanding your pool. Be prepared to mentor and really focus on relationship building as much as possible. I think someone said, I think the quote was like, it's really an investment, and it's not necessarily a monetary investment. You're investing in your people, and it will make a huge difference. For advancement, we talked about creating mentoring opportunities to help new employees kind of build out their career, figure out what they ultimately want to do. And we thought that would really affect the retention a lot, because if someone really feels like they have a purpose and they're following a path, that's going to help with retention and that. And is that everything on this part? We had a lot of things. Sorry. So we wanted all people, not just the diverse employees, to be responsible for providing support. We thought that would really focus on the retention aspects, taking advantage, and this kind of plays into that, taking advantage of the ERGs, which we found out stands for Employee Resource Groups. And then retention also involves evaluating policies so that the career paths are clear for people, so they know like when they can take time off, when they can be with their families, things like that. Making sure you're accessible. So that's more than, I think the example was, it's more than just like having wheelchair accessible. Is this environment accessible for all learning types, all working types, things like that. Something more on accessibility. Oh, having an accessibility survey. That kind of talks to people about if they think their work environment's accessible. Remote working programs promotes diversity because it provides a way for people to be with their communities and be with their families, but still do work for your company. And always doing research. How do you know if you're succeeding? And setting goals.
My goodness. You guys wrote a book. Everybody give them a round of applause, please. All right, so we want to make sure we give everybody a chance to speak, so let's move on to the next group, group 4, educate the organization.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Megan. And being note taker means you're the speaker for this group. So we had a lot of great conversations. Diversity training and leadership training was a big part of it, but talking about taking those learnings and actually baking that into all the processes, so that it's like a persistent thing that comes up. So if you do calibrations, if you do reviews, things like that, that's part of that. Talking about once you get the numbers, to share those numbers and those targets and do sort of a roadshow internally at the organization, getting people on board in terms of why you're doing this. And then creating a dashboard for those metrics, so that's something that people are always seeing. Are we moving the target? Having it be a regular topic at all hands meetings, and then also when it's a regular topic, have diverse folks in your organization be sharing those learnings, so have that be represented as well. Talking about having training around conversations and how to have a shared language to do this, also how to do feedback and give language and tools for people to give feedback if they experience that in the organization. Tying it to org values and modeling that in actual actions, giving people examples of what that means. ERGs also came up in our group. Doing ongoing internal surveys to get whether people are experiencing this, what they're thinking, how the progress is going, and then sharing that broadly with the organization. Microaggression training, which I guess is when it's sort of the unconscious bias that you might do if you look down at a cell phone and what that might trigger for folks. I think those were the big things. Anything I missed? No. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, group 5 in the back. You're going to talk about putting in the work.
All right, similar to all other groups, writing meant presenting. So we're group 5, and we were meant to cover putting in the work. And one of the recommendations was to make sure we focused on metrics. And as you'll see, we have all these ideas on how to put in the work, and then very few ideas in terms of how to actually monitor and like record if we're doing it correctly. But I'll go through those really quickly. Some of the ideas we came up with in terms of how to put in the work were performance reviews, and making sure that we are asking for ways to be included and feel included from our employees, making sure we have C-level champions, inclusivity surveys, employee resource groups, reasonable logistics and availability. So what that meant to us was, if you're going to invite your organization to participate in a certain event, making it at a time that everyone can come. And then on the back end, tracking who actually showed up and are they asking for more events. One of the things that we stressed was incentivizing participation. If we're going to incentivize, sales and other really key elements of our organization, we need to put just as high a premium on participating and helping others feel included. We wanted to make sure we were getting enough people in the door. We wanted to initiate outside participation from the workplace and open up multiple channels for people to feel included. We wanted to kind of increase the rate at which we did low-risk exposure, so events and visits and partnerships. On the more tactical and recruiting side, job description evaluation, making sure that someone is paying attention to the messaging that we're putting out there and what we're actually looking for, and does that elicit inclusivity. Community outreach, independent resume tracking, so kind of having a separate set of eyes on the resumes that are coming in and saying like, oh, this recruiter rejected so-and-so, was that the right decision, or is there another opportunity to kind of increase our diversity or our inclusion? And to that end, creating a balanced pipeline at all stages of the recruitment process. So if we do all this work, the results should be tracked monthly, quarterly, annually. We're going to look at attendance of events, the number of partners we work with. Is our recruiting functional? Or I put fun, and I don't know what that means. Is our recruiting fun? What's our turnover and what's our attrition? What are our hiring something? What's our application rate? And what are our hiring demographics? And is there buzz and synergy? Because we ran out of ideas. So that was everything we could think of in terms of rubber to the road. And one more.
How's everybody doing? Good. I think this diversity issue is really a recruiting issue. So within organizations, it's hard to look inside yourself to get an answer to a problem that's not within inside the organization. So I think what companies need to do is go into the community and get to know these groups, the women, the black engineers, Hispanic engineers, all these different type of people, and honestly get to know them and let them know that they're wanted and they're needed. Because how do you attract them if they don't know that you actually want them in the organization? A lot of the things that we're talking about is kind of like within the organization, let's implement these things, but really what needs to happen is we need to get outside of the organization and get in the communities and start to speak to these groups and learn about who they are and what they really want. So,
thank you. So that was actually a really great point around putting in the work, right? So oftentimes we do focus internally. Internally needs to be fixed too, right? So we focus on diversity a lot of times because that's easy to measure. What we don't focus on is inclusivity. So creating an inclusive environment and putting in the work is around reaching out to communities that you serve. It is around reaching out to communities that are underrepresented, and it is going out into those communities to put in the work, to actually be there, to mentor, to allow people who might not fit the standard profile to know that you want them to work there too. All of that is around putting in the work. It's not just going, all right, we've got this number, we need this number. It's not just around making sure that your recruiting initiatives are on par. It is looking at your entire company. Remember, we looked at our definitions to begin: a diverse workforce, an inclusive workplace, and then taking a look at your products and services. We have a couple of minutes maybe 2 minutes. So we're gonna open it up for Q&A, but I'm gonna answer this gentleman's question really quick around one of the things I suggested for an executive to do as an action plan. How many have heard of the Rooney Rule? The Rooney Rule. Okay, so the Rooney Rule was created by the NFL. And that was because 90% of the NFL's football players are black, African American. None of the coaches were, right? So when you start to get into upper management, it didn't match who the players were. And that didn't make sense. So they instituted the Rooney Rule, which says they cannot make a coaching hire without having a diverse slate. That does not mean that they have to hire someone diverse, whatever that definition is. It just means that they have to have a diverse hiring slate before they make a decision. And so that was one of my suggestions, that for director plus positions, which typically are small in number in most companies, right? Smaller than lower levels. So for director plus positions, or even VP plus, do not make a hiring decision until you've seen a diverse candidate slate. You're always gonna hire whoever's best for the role, right? But you shouldn't make a decision until you've made sure that you've seen everyone that should be in your pipeline. So that's just one suggestion that I gave an executive, and they actually did it. They actually did it, and it helped increase women in leadership. I'm not gonna say the numbers or who it was, but it actually did help increase their women in leadership. So we may be able to take 2 questions. Saw you, go for it.
Well-rounded way, how are we touching on groups that maybe aren't visibly diverse?
So it's how you define the Rooney Rule and what diversity is to you. So there's also diversity in leadership, right? So we heard a little introvert-extrovert conversation over here, right? So there's all these discussions about who makes a better leader, introverts or extroverts, right? And sometimes quiet leadership is often dismissed. So it's not that the Rooney Rule is just about ethnicity or gender. It is about how you define what diversity and inclusion is, and then going after that as a diverse candidate slate.
A lot of our conversation today, I think we're filled with a room of people that is all about diversity. But when you talk about making the sale to your CEO or a CFO, I think we should talk about monetary returns on inclusion. There are actually studies that are coming forth. The McKinsey report in January 2015 showed that there's a 15% increase in productivity for companies that have female and male diversity, a 35% increase in diversity productivity in companies that are both female, but also racially and culturally diverse. So there's actually a financial return to diversity, not just, hey, it makes us feel good, it's the right thing to do, but it actually makes companies more productive. It helps in reaching the customers, helps in retention and all the things that we're talking about, but there's actually a financial benefit, and that's, I think, our message, or one of our messages should be, it's not only the right thing to do, but there are actually financial returns associated with increasing diversity.
Thank you. So that's around the business case for diversity, right? So remember we talked about our definitions, and especially when you start to look at a diverse and inclusive marketplace, nobody says no to green. They don't care what the color is. They don't care what the gender is, right? So when you show that your marketplace actually could increase because you are creating products and services to match your global user base, or you're showing what this gentleman just said, which is around homogeneous groups versus diverse groups and what that can actually do for a company, nobody says no to green. And that's a great way to get executive buy-in. So I think with that, we have to end. Thank you all so very much for participating and putting in the work. Really appreciate you. Martina and I will be available to kind of chat with you guys out in the hall if you'd like, since we have to end the session.